Welcome to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. Are you doing the best for your client to help them create their legacy? Are you creating a plan that goes far beyond finances to help people ensure that it becomes the driving force behind all decisions? On this podcast, hosts Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller will help you with growing your practice and your clients' peace of mind. Together, they bring the best and brightest minds to share with you how to help your clients develop their best legacy. And now, here are your hosts, Katie Beth and Stan.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome you all to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. Today, I'm here with my guest, Brad Hamblen. Brad is the branch manager at Citywide Mortgage. He's a real estate investor and an all-around entrepreneur. And Brad, thanks for being here today. We're glad to have you.
Thanks for having me, Josh. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So to get started here, I'd like to just hear a little bit about your journey, a little bit about your background, what got you in the mortgage and real estate realms. And if you don't mind just sharing a little bit about those things, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah. So my journey into the mortgage world started back in 2002 and actually led into 2003. I graduated college in 2002 and the job market was kind of depressed because of 9/11 and there wasn't many jobs out there in my field that I was looking to get into, which was marketing. And when that kind of happened, I had a friend that kept getting asked to become a mortgage loan officer. And after about the third or fourth pitch that this guy was pitching to my buddy or my actual roommate at the time, I was like, man, if you don't jump in there, I was like, I'm going to. And then all of a sudden my buddy bucked up and got in it. And then right there, he started in May and I started in June. And believe it or not, we still are doing it today. And he works for a different company and I work for Citywide, and we still talk on a consistent basis and, trade war stories in the mortgage business. And that's kind of what got me led into that path. And even going back into that day, back then, man, if you really want to talk about it, there used to be infomercials for Carlton Sheets and stuff where you get the books and the cassettes and then talk about buying real estate with no money down. And I actually found one of the cassettes, going through old stuff. I don't know why I decided to keep it, but I was going to show it to my buddy because the one that got in the mortgage business, we got that group together and we learned a lot about real estate. We're in the mortgage industry. So it's it's all kind of combined into one, and started buying properties and that in maybe 2007, 2008 in that realm, and kind of been doing it ever since. And took a break for a little while and then really got back into it in 2019 and 2020.
Very nice. Yeah, I think we shared in a private conversation that same thing. I graduated in about 2002, and I was in the mortgage business myself for a handful of years before getting into the insurance side of things. But there's a lot of things that I found rewarding in that business. From your perspective, what's the most rewarding aspect of how you help individuals, whether it's building their financial security through homeownership or even on the investment side of things?
Well, yeah, that's one of the biggest things is that it's statistically known that if you get into buying a house earlier in life, you're going to have more economics and a better net worth overall, because you're going to be able to have starting out younger, you're going to have property to trade. And it may not be that and that's your forever home buying it at that age. But when you start buying property young, you start building equity, and the equity comes in two forms. There's the buy down or the pay down of the note that you have that secured the loan, that secured the property. And then there's also the appreciation of the property. So in today's environment, the appreciation, depending on where you are, could be all over the place. But the majority of the time, there's been a calm appreciation of anywhere from 3 to 5% on an annual basis. And there was some period of time when you talk about the mortgage meltdown in 2007, 2008, and 2009, where things got set back. But if you go back and look at the statistics on that now, if you bought a home during that time frame or bought a home before or after, you're still ahead of the game right now.
That actually brings up a good point. I'd be curious, what do you typically say to people that have concerns about either waiting to purchase a home because of where interest rates are at or just being concerned about that timing aspect? I imagine you come across that on a fairly regular basis. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So currently, if you go back, there's a systemic problem that goes back to the mortgage meltdown that occurred back in 2007, 2008, where all the builders went away. So all these guys that were builders, they were building homes, and then the market plummets, crashes, and then there was too many houses at the time, and that's where we had the market get flooded with homes. And they all left and they had to go do something else. Well, now where we're at today is that based off of the number of families that were formed from 2012 until now, and you can get online and see some of the actual real stats. It's estimated, depending on who you look at in the media, there's somewhere between 3.5 and 7.5 million houses short to keep up with population growth with the family formations that have occurred. And you also have a lot of different things that put more pressure on the inventory, because now you have people that are aging in place. You have people that are like, they're just staying in, they're living longer, they're staying in homes longer, and there's not as much exchanging of the market, which brings it to the biggest problem that there is, that if you're on the fence thinking about not buying a house and it's going to be your first home, like they're not building any more first time home buyer houses. Like they're just not building them at that price point. There's no solution to creating like an affordable housing like way for it to be done. And the cost to buy land and develop land and push all this stuff, the builders are going to build a property that's profitable for them to do. They're in this to make money. And if you go and look at the top builders, you got the number one builder is DR Horton. And going back, I don't know the exact number, but in like, it was either 21 or 22, they built like 89,000 homes. And if you look at how the market was last year in 2024, I don't think they would have built as many homes, but the amount of demand would have still been there, like the need for it. But the amount of people buying it would have not been there, just because there's a lot of people that is taken back. But they're not building at a first time home buyer price point. They're like building at your second home price point, because they have to be at a higher price point in order to actually make a profit on what they're doing. But when you look at it, if you say, hey, there's not going to be any new inventory created at a first time home buyer price point. So if you're buying a house for, like in my market, we're in the Northern Kentucky, Greater Cincinnati area. If you're buying a house that's $200,000, they're not making any more $200,000 houses. They're just not going to. So it's best for you to get your hands on one as quickly as possible. As long as you can afford it, get into the market and get into the game as quickly as possible, because they're not going to make any more of them.
What does that do to the lower end of the market? People trying to get into, first for their first home. There's obviously not new houses, which means they're going to buy something that's been around for a while. I mean, does that create challenges?
Sometimes it does, and sometimes you're in a situation where you're just saying, hey, you can't, you need to you need to figure out a way to make this work, because your numbers, you have to push your numbers higher in order to get to a house that's actually going to be able to get financing or be livable. And you're seeing also a lot of rehabbers and people that are fixing properties and flipping them and bringing them up to where they need to be to make them to where they can be sold to the general first time home buyer, because the first time home buyer is not going to be able to take on a project that's like a complete rehab of a property. And some of those are available right now, and some of those are out there where you can say, hey, they're just like starting rehabbing the property and then getting ready for somebody to buy it in the future. And those are the first time, they usually tend to still fall in the first time home buyer price point. If you take like a really old home, fix it up, maybe a shotgun style home or something like that, city centric, and that's kind of the price point that still works for a first time home buyer and gets them in there.
You have problems, I guess, with the durability and all those other issues. Question how much the renovations are long standing. But
yeah,
what are some of the other challenges on the flip side of the rewards that you feel like are most pressing for your industry and even for homeownership nationwide?
probably the biggest pressure is like interest rates right now, because with them being higher, we're having to come up with like creative ways to make it affordable for people to handle the payments. So sometimes we're doing like a temporary rate buy down, where there's like a 2-1 buy down, where you can buy it down 2% the first year, and then it's 1% lower the second year, and then the third year is at the market rate. we still want the client to be comfortable with what the market rate is, knowing that's what the payment's eventually going to be.
Yeah.
We're still going over like making sure that they're comfortable with that.
Right. Okay. That's a good strategy. Yeah, you got to get into something. Did they base the qualification on the reduced rate, or? That's
No,
good.
they base the credit. You have to qualify for it at the fully like index rate. And one of the things that's really confusing about that program is that, like, let's say today's environment, that the rate would be 7%. That it's right around there, given give or take eighth or a quarter or whatever, and depending on what your credit qualifications are. That loan will end up at 7%. All the documents throughout the whole process all say 7%. So the clients get very confused, but the temporary buy down that buys it down to the lower rates is actually like prepaying that portion of the payment so that it's lower for them. The payment's actually lower that's due the first year and the second year, but everything still has 7% on there. Like there's nothing that says 5% first year, 6% second year, 7% the third year. It all just says 7%, and then the temporary buy down is there where it's captured. And you have to have the seller participate in that transaction and do that buy down, or the lender can do that buy down, but the lender doing it to a 2% buy down is just probably not going to be possible because there isn't enough. You'd have to stretch the rate out to cover that, and you'd be starting at 8.5, and it wouldn't make a lot of fiscal sense to do that.
Right. Interesting. Yeah. And if you've got somebody that's not familiar with that paperwork to begin with, to have numbers that don't seem to resonate with what, what they think they're getting into, that's going to add more further complications, I would imagine.
Right.
When talking about getting a buyer in the right mortgage, what kind of processes do you maybe have to help them think about things from a long-term perspective, as far as how it factors into their long-term financial stability or even their legacy down the road for their family? Is there anything formal that you do working with clients?
Yes. So when we talk, the very first initial conversation that we have is we get it clear and concise at the beginning, like pre-approval is not the same as affordability.
Sure.
When we pre-approve someone in the mortgage field, it's like you're looking at their gross income and you're looking at the debts they have on the credit report. You're not looking at any of the other expenses they have. And you're not even factoring in what their net income is. So when they have that going along, they may think in their mind like, oh, well, I'm pre-approved for this amount. And a lot of lenders out there, a lot of loan officers or branch managers, people that are doing the day-to-day, they will just say, hey, you're pre-approved for this amount. And they're not really taking into account affordability. So I always tell the clients, like, your pre-approved amount is not what you can afford. And we need to go really think about what I don't like to call it a budget. I like to say like your conscious spending plan, or your numbers that you're looking at, what you're comfortable paying per month for your mortgage and allocating for your mortgage in that realm. Because if you're comfortable with $2,000 a month, then we need to go back and work into the numbers with your down payment. What gets the payment to $2,000 a month? Is there something that you can get in the marketplace for that price point? And we can calculate the numbers backwards, because it's very specific per client on how you're going to go figure that out.
Just correct me if I'm wrong. If somebody's got 10 kids versus one kid, most of that stuff that they're responsible for on a monthly basis is not hitting anything that's going to be reflected on their mortgage qualification, right?
No, not at all. And that's not something that we even would look at or even consider. There's no multiple, that's a perfect example right there. You can have 10 kids and we're not going to look at it any different if you have 1 or 10. And obviously the cost per kid, the cost on what your family expenses are going to be completely different with that kind of family size.
Absolutely. Very good. It's good to know that you really take that approach, because people can get in over their heads, especially not being familiar. If we could, let's kind of shift gears a little bit. I know you do a lot of work that's meaningful to you and meaningful for the people you help, as far as helping veterans maybe become aware of programs that they maybe didn't know they're eligible for, and maybe qualify, for more and better properties that are a better fit for them. Tell us a little bit about some of those things.
Yeah, I think the VA loan has a little bit of a bad rap when it comes to the real estate market. Some real estate agents or real estate professionals, they don't view the mortgage as being as sturdy, because they think that, oh, they're not putting any money down. But in reality, these veterans have spent 4 years in the service, or they've served their time so that they would have this eligibility. And it's a hugely beneficial program to where they don't have any mortgage insurance. They can finance the whole amount. And if they're receiving any sort of service connected disability pay, they're exempt from the funding fee. That's one of the, like, I call that like the trifecta. Like, you're getting everything that you can possibly imagine through the VA, and they're not having to pay even the funding fee. So what the big stigma, I think, is that there's a big issue with what the property requirements are for the VA. And there's really not any additional property requirements besides there can't be any health or safety issues. And they're looking to make sure that there's no like deferred maintenance that's extreme, and you still can't have any structural issue or major problem with a property where it would cause an issue with the stability of the loan, where it would cause an issue with that. But in reality, it's the VA loan's a pretty simple, easy loan to qualify for, and most properties fit the standard for it.
Very nice. Are there, I would imagine, I mean, you can't find many people more disciplined than your average, armed forces veteran. What are the default rates? I would imagine they would be lower, if not on par with a traditional mortgage. Do you have any idea what?
That's a great question. I've never actually dove into like what the default rates are on a VA loan. That would be something that would be interesting to see what they are. What I have seen though is that default rates are really directly correlated to credit scores, and your credits, the lower your credit score is, the higher the default rate is.
Sure.
So with the veterans, it really depends on what type of, because the veterans, the VA loan can house someone that has an 800 credit score, and it could also have somebody that has a 550 credit score qualifying for 100% financing. It really depends on who the person is. And I think that the determining factor on how many go into default is probably more played by credit score than it is necessarily if it's a VA loan. But I don't think there's a lot of VA loans that go into default based on the amount of, and there's not a lot of loans going into default right this minute.
Yeah. Do you have any individual stories that you can think of that come to mind of a veteran maybe that you've had the opportunity to help, whether it was through a program they were unaware of or just through the process because they wouldn't have taken it on by themselves?
Yeah, I did have one gentleman that it'll always stay in my mind, because we were working on this, and he was, the one thing that's different about the National Guard is that with the armed forces, whether it's Navy, Army, Marines, all those, they all house everything centralized, and you get a DD-214, which is like your service record, and it comes to you that way. But on the National Guard side or the reservist side, it's different. It's actually housed individually at each command center. So depending on where you do drill at is where they keep the records for you. So for instance, like this gentleman that I helped, he was based out of Dayton, Ohio, and he would always go to Dayton to do drills. And in order for you to qualify for a VA loan, you have to have 6 credible years of service in the National Guard or in the reserves. And they look at your score based off of, you have to go to drill at least once a year. This client went through all this process, and he was in there for the 6 years. The one thing that had happened though is he didn't mention it, like he wasn't around for a year and a half, and he showed up and ended up like kind of disappeared for a while, and then ended up showing back up and reporting to drill, and that is a little bit different than when you're in the actual service. But what he went over is that he got picked up in like Hendersonville or Henderson, Nevada, outside of Vegas. And we called there, and they actually had record of him being there for a weekend in one of the years that he didn't have his credible services. And with that record there, he actually qualified for the VA loan. So nice. he was very happy that we were able to find that, and we actually searched around, and he said, well, hey, I did spend a weekend here out in Nevada, and he was able to qualify based off of that. And it was an interesting story and that probably happened like maybe 10 years ago or so.
That's awesome. That's a great example, I'm sure, of how you tend to go above and beyond. I mean, a lot of people would just say, sorry, we can't get you qualified, and let it go with that. So it says a lot about the way you do business.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Um,
what.
Absolutely. The let's shift a little bit now again to personal legacy. What are your personal beliefs on legacy? How are the things that you're doing as far as setting your family up from the real estate holdings you have, the things that you're investing in, just how your family thinks about money and homeownership as a part of overall wealth? I know that's a broad question.
Yeah.
You had a couple of different points within there, but tell me about legacy and the Hamlin family.
Yeah. So it really stems from one of these things. So my kids were asked by one of the like close family friends, like, what type of music do you listen to?
Mm,
And they go, we don't really listen to music. We listen to my dad's documentaries. And what they were talking about were the Audible books that are constantly playing.
mm,
And when you think about this and you look at it as a bigger picture, like these Audible books and there's probably maybe 5 books that were purchased here and there that were kind of like entertainment books,
mm,
but the majority of them are all like either finance, business, marketing. They're, self-discipline. They are books that are about like how to be the best you that you can be. And my kids have been listening to that for 10 plus years. And they're like songs. So they've heard them so many times. So I can reference them and be like, hey guys, you remember listening to this? I was like, this is why, because now they're 16, 15 years old. So they're kind of getting a better idea of that. So we're talking about the future and what that looks like. We're talking about colleges. We're talking about not going to colleges. We're talking about all these different things. So one of the biggest things that we talk about is like creating generational wealth. In
mm,
order to really have the biggest impact that you can, help as many people as you can, whether it be through, your philanthropic like goals, you have to have the resources to be able to help the most people. So we've talked about that, had conversations, acquiring properties and using real estate as one, using finance, looking at leveraging different businesses, and talking to the kids to make sure that they understand that like the difference on how to set themselves up for success in the future and not
mm.
necessarily get trapped into a situation of like consumerism and buying the next best thing that they come across.
Right. Yeah, I love that you made the first point you made was about the audiobooks. And I have a 6-year-old little girl, but it's the same thing. It's like, they say, well, it's caught more than taught, right? But just hearing that type of thing is, I've always been a big believer that legacy is about what you're exposing your kids to, the values and the virtues that you're showing them by how you live. And that's a big, big example of that. Yeah, and then absolutely, I also agree with, it sounds like you would agree, I should say, with the idea that money just kind of magnifies, having the resources available to you magnifies who you really are. So, put in the right hands, it just allows you to do a lot more good and, unfortunately can go the other way as well. But we won't mention any examples of that here. Do you have any particular legacy goals that you're working towards as you're helping others with their legacy? And then how do you think about the fact that what you're doing has like the dual effect of helping others create their legacy, and then also in the process that's allowing you to continue to build your legacy? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So one of the things I feel like real estate is the vehicle that is here that it's the closest to me because I'm in the mortgage business. My wife works in real estate. She works on a real estate team. I've been exposed to it so much. So I teach people how to build wealth and build wealth through real estate and how to acquire real estate. And I also teach it to my real estate partners because a lot of them don't, like if you talk to some even the top producing agents, they don't own like an inventory of properties. I'm like, well,
Mhm.
how much do you have in your 401k? When you talk about that number and they go, what's your exit strategy for this? Because there's a lot of questions that come into involved with, you're self-employed and you're in this position. You have to really position yourself to be successful in the future. So owning real estate and you're seeing it firsthand, and you get opportunities if you're doing your job the right way and you're working your career right, you're going to run into opportunities before anybody else does. So I try to teach them like, hey, if you find a property and you're trying to figure out how to make it work, well, you can come to me and we'll figure out how you can get the financing. The biggest challenge is finding the right property that will make you the money or show you how to do it. So with real estate, there's so many different exit strategies. There's so many different ways that you can make money, you can flip. You can buy and hold, you can BRRRR, you can wholesale, you can, as a realtor, you can, it's like called retail wholesale, where you can take something and buy it and then just put it on the market yourself. If someone wants a quick cash and get out of the property, you can buy it at a wholesale price and then you put it out there on the active market yourself. There's so many different ways that real estate agents have, and they have the keys to the kingdom because they're seeing the properties before they actually go on the market. And I try to explain to each one, and I picked this up from one of the Keller Williams like family reunions. I went to a couple of them. I was like, hey, these are all realtors going here. I'm gonna go there and be like, their gold is my gold. If I figure out what they're after, I'll know what I'm after, right? So I'm sitting there listening to this speaker, and they said every property that I walk into to do a listing presentation, before I walk, I look around and make the decision, like, is this a property I want to own? And it's like, okay, if that's a property you want to own, then okay, there's 3 different options, Mr. Seller. You got the fix it up price that you could sell it for, you got the sell it as is price, and you got the buy it now price, where I'll buy this thing right now for this price. And there's people that are out there that just want the easy button. They don't want to sit there and wait on the market. They don't want to sit there and do all these other things. They just want to be done, because there's a lot of stress that goes involved with selling a property. And sometimes it's a love, like a estate situation, a divorce situation. There's all kinds of different distress situations that can cause people to just really want to hit the easy button and not deal with the process of going to the market and even putting it out there as is. So
everybody has a much different premium they place on convenience, or like you said, just getting out of a situation for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that gets us pretty close to the end of our time. It's been a super insightful conversation for me. Before we wrap up, I'd love for you to share how our audience and listeners can, how they can find you, anything specific that they may be able to engage with you with.
Yeah. So all my contacts on Linktree, I have a Linktree account at bradhamblen.info. So it's BRADHAMBLEN.info. That'll take you to a Linktree account. You can connect with me on any social media platform that's on there. You can look at my reviews. You can request a call. You can set anything up that you want to, and that'll get you to me.
Awesome. And any final words of advice for those looking to build a strong financial foundation using homeownership and real estate as a foundation for their legacy?
Buy property as early as you possibly can. And if you can figure out a way to house hack your way and own a few properties as you go, that's the best way to go about it. And if you look it up and go house hack, and you can go to my website, and I made a couple YouTubes of videos about it too, but any video can talk to you about house hacking and how you kind of start here, and then you can leave that and leave it as a trailing rental. And that'll help you build generational wealth over time, because if you do that early enough and you focus on paying these houses off, you could end up with 3, 4, 5 houses that are all paid off by the time you're about to retire.
Absolutely. That's great advice. Well, we certainly appreciate it, Brad. And thank you again for being here. All of your information will be in the show notes. So anybody listening, make sure that you find Brad there. So Brad, we appreciate your time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being on here. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks for listening to the Legacy Leaders podcast, guys.
You've been listening to the Legacy Leaders podcast with Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller. For more information on them and the show, please visit pinnaclelegacylaw.com. If you like what you've learned today, do share the program with your friends and subscribe wherever podcasts are found.
49 faces looked to him in triumph. Over the last 12 months, they had each taken turns and promoted his business for a week at a time, driving over $987,342 in revenue. What if you had a network of 50 centers of influence who promoted your business every week for a year? Grab your copy of the #1 Amazon best-selling book, The Ultimate Guide to Growing Your Business with a Podcast, at 33% off the Amazon price by going to ultimatepodcastbook.com. Again, that website for 33% off the Amazon price is ultimatepodcastbook.com.